Nick had lived a good life. He got to go to the best schools, lived in the best neighborhoods. He had lived a privileged white-collar life in every possible way. He had access to all the literature he desired to read. He was in leadership roles and was even already a tenured professor. Yet he was sitting here completely stunned by this blue-collar worker teaching crowds of people in ways he could only dream of. He captivated his audience like Nick had never seen. He took complex topics that Nick himself struggled with and simplified them to a level that even the uneducated could understand. Word had been coming to Nick for weeks now that this man was teaching in such incredible ways, but to witness it in person, that was something else. As the man finished speaking and the crowd started to leave, Nick noticed one of the man's coworkers nearby. He knew he had to find a way to get a private meeting with this roughneck teacher, and this coworker just might be his ticket. As Nick made his way through the crowd towards the coworker, it dawned on him that the people who made up this crowd were from all over the spectrum. Some had likely never had a formal education, and yet they were side by side with others that Nick had actually taught. Who was this man that people could overlook the status of those around them and just listen and learn? Nick finally made it to the coworker and asked him to set up a meeting for that night. He tried to use his status as a leader and a professor to apply pressure in an attempt to gain access to the blue-collar teacher. While the coworker seemed unimpressed, he agreed to set up the meeting. As night drew near, Nick felt an anticipation he hadn't felt since he was a child. This man he was about to meet intrigued him in a way he just couldn't explain. The intelligence, the understanding, the authority, where did it come from? He had so many questions, which was so strange for a professor to experience. But the moment finally was here. Nick sat down across from the very average-looking man. He didn't come across as arrogant despite the knowledge he contained. Instead, he seemed humble, kind even. And then the first words out of this man's mouth, it made absolutely no sense. Suddenly, Nick was having second thoughts about requesting this meeting, but for some reason, he chose to stay. And thank goodness he did. After that strange start to the conversation, the rest was very profound. As Nick was walking home, staying in the shadows, his head was spinning. He had to keep this meeting a secret. No one would trust a professor who dared to learn something from a blue-collar worker. He would remember that meeting for the rest of his life. Now fast forward to the present, and those words were continuing to echo in Nick's head. As he struggled to understand what was happening, he tried to calm down the situation, tried to defend this blue-collar worker, but his fate was sealed. Little did he know he would soon understand the words the man had said. As Joe helped him to bury this kind blue-collar man who had taught Nick the professor so much, his shame had begun to both fade away and yet grow at the same time. The shame he had for associating with this roughneck had all but gone, but the shame of being associated with his profession soared. Nick said the words to himself once again, you must be born again. But the words that Nick truly took to heart were when the man told Nick how much God loved the world. And Nicodemus, the Pharisee, would go on to believe in the blue-collar man named Jesus, who laid down his life for all. Or so I've been told.